Hey y'all, it's Sarah. So I have a fun kind of new video for me well, it's new for me, but I've seen several people do it and I thought it would be fun to do for you, and it's the first time tag. So basically it's just a bunch of questions about first time on different things, and yeah, so I'm going to get started. I have a list on my iPad. Do you still talk to your first love? I actually do. I'm married to him, so that's kind of cool, I guess. But yes, my husband was my first love way back in the day. I like to tell myself that I loved this boy when I was in second grade, but I think it was just an infatuation because he had really cool hair. So, but yes, my first love is actually my husband. So, what was your first job? My first job was at Hancock Fabrics, and I don't know if they have Hancock Fabrics everywhere. I know they have them all over Texas, but it's just basically your generic fabric store. So my mom is, she loves to sew and quilt and stuff, and so she loved me having that first job. I never used the discount. She always used it. But what was your first car? My first car was a 95 Saturn Ion, and it was this terrible green color. It was a terrible green color. And it was super basic. It was super cheap. In fact, it was so cheap my dad just put on his credit card, if that tells you anything. So, but that was my first car, and I drove it for 2 years. Who was the first person to text you today? I actually don't have my phone in the same room as me right now, but I think it was my husband, actually. After we parted ways this morning, he went to work and I went to work. I think he was the first person that texted me. Who was the first person you thought of this morning? My husband, because I was wondering if he was awake already whenever I woke up, like I do every morning. I wonder if he got up before me, which he usually does. So, who was your first grade teacher? My first grade teacher was, I think I only had one teacher in first grade, and it was Miss Phillips. And I remember her very well because when I was in first grade, how she did our spelling test was if you made 100, then you got a Jolly Rancher. And I remember that I made a lot of hundreds. I'm a pretty good speller, and so one week I made 100, and I walked up to get my Jolly Rancher, and she allows you to eat it in her class. And so I popped it in my mouth, and I started walking back to my desk, and it actually went all the way down my throat, and I choked on it. And luckily I got it down just fine. But from that day, from that time on, the rest of the day, she let me have a glass of water on my desk, and so I thought it was so cool because I was the only one in the class that got to have a glass of water on my desk. So that was Miss Phillips, my first grade teacher. Where did you go on your first ride on an airplane? I have no idea. We flew a lot when I was little for different things for our church, and the earliest one that I can remember was probably, if I had to guess, I don't know if we flew there, but we went to Chattanooga one year, and maybe we flew there. I don't know if we drove. But the first plane ride I actually remember is going to the Bahamas, and I believe I was 4, and I remember going to the Bahamas and riding in the plane. Who was your first best friend, and do you still talk? My first best friend, her name is Lauren, and yes, we still talk. She lives in Texas, and I'm in Georgia, but we still talk and talk about makeup and all kinds of stuff. But we've been best friends since we were before kindergarten. She and my old neighbor from my old neighborhood, she went over to their house and his mom babysat her, and she took piano lessons from her. So we hung out a lot, just playing next door and going outside and riding bikes and stuff like that. So hi, Lauren. But where was your first sleepover? I believe my first sleepover, if you count it as a sleepover, I used to go over to my aunt's house all the time because, well, I love my aunt, but she would take me and my brother to Walmart and get us candy if we stayed the night, so we used to call her all the time and ask if we could come stay the night. So that's the first sleepover that I remember going to anyway. Who was the first person you talked to today? My husband. Whose wedding were you in the first time? I believe, if I remember correctly, I believe it was my cousin Catherine, and I think I was a flower girl in 2 weddings, like pretty close to each other, but I believe that my cousin Catherine's wedding was first, and I was the flower girl. What was the first thing you did this morning? Make a cup of coffee, like the first thing I do every morning because I can't function without it. What was the first concert you ever went to? I honestly don't know this answer. My uncle is a part of a lot of different bands like ZZ Top and stuff like that, so I'm sure I've gone to some of those concerts, but I don't remember them. The first concert that I chose to go to was NSYNC, and that was in between 6th grade and 7th grade. And I went with my friend Arlen, and we got to go to the NSYNC concert. It was so awesome. I loved it. What was your first broken bone? Knock on wood, but I've never had a broken bone, so hopefully we're keeping it that way. Your first piercing? My first piercing was my ears, my first hole. I had those done for my 5th birthday. My mom took me to Merle Norman, and I don't know how I thought they pierced ears, but whenever we got there, they showed me the little gun that they used to pierce my ears, and I freaked out and started crying. And luckily my mom talked me into it, and they told me it doesn't hurt, it hurts like in your head, but it doesn't actually hurt. And so I finally got it done, and I was so glad that I did, and I never had to get my first hole re-pierced. So that was my first piercing. First foreign country you've gone to? This is going to sound silly, but is the Bahamas a foreign country? I think it is. It's not in the U.S., so the Bahamas. I've also gone to Canada and Mexico, but the first one I went to was the Bahamas when I was 4. First movie you remember seeing? I don't know if I remember seeing it necessarily, or if I remember people telling me about me watching it, but whenever I was when I was between 2 and 3, my mom was pregnant with my brother, and my dad had just had back surgery. My mom was on bed rest, pregnant with my brother. My dad had just had back surgery. So they were both laid up in bed, and I watched Mary Poppins a lot. So Mary Poppins is probably the first movie I remember watching. I think I remember watching it. I can't tell the difference if I actually remember watching it, or my family talks about it all the time, or if I remember that. So, but Mary Poppins for sure. When was your first detention? I don't think I ever really, well, no, that's a lie. I got detention in 3rd grade. I guess you could call it detention. I was told I couldn't go to recess. But I got it in 3rd grade because I decided to write a note to my best friend Jessica at the time. And I wrote about who we liked, how we liked this guy named Kyle, and I wrote about several people in our class and blah, blah, blah. I was so stupid. I signed it my name, like my full name, first and last name. I signed it. And my teacher found it, and she asked me, we had gone, the way our elementary school was is every year the high school in our district would put on a play, and so they would take the elementary school students to go see this play at the high school during the day. It was really fun. And so I remember we had gone to see the play Beauty and the Beast, and we got back to the school. We were waiting to walk in from the buses. My teacher approached me and said, "Sarah, did you write this note?" And I was like, "No, I have no idea what that is." And I totally lied. And she said, "Well, it has your name on it." And I was like, "Somebody must have put my name on there." And she said, "Well, if I find out that you wrote it, you're going to get a conduct mark for writing it, and then you're also going to get a second conduct mark for lying to me that you wrote it." And I was like, "Okay, no problem." I don't know what I was thinking. And anyway, guilt overtook me, so I finally confessed that I wrote it. And so because I had 2 conduct marks at the time, you weren't allowed to go to recess if you had 2 conduct marks. So I had to stay in from recess. So I guess that was my first detention. And my mom made me write this sorry letter and all this stuff. I got in more trouble at home than I did at school. But who was your first roommate? My first roommate, I never shared a room with my brother, so I wouldn't consider him a roommate. My first roommate was my freshman year in college, and her name was Sarah also. And she was, we went 5 hours away to college my freshman year, but her and I went to high school together. So her name was Sarah, and we got along really well. We made separate friends when we got there, and I think that was a good thing. So I highly recommend that. Sometimes living with your best friends isn't always good, although I did live with my best friend my sophomore year in college, and that worked out great too. So, but my first roommate was Sarah. What were the first lessons you ever took? My first lessons I ever took were swimming lessons. I'm assuming, I took piano lessons really young as well, but I'm pretty sure swimming lessons came before piano lessons. But I took both of them. I'm pretty sure swimming came first. Who was the first person beauty related on YouTube you ever watched? My first person that on YouTube I ever watched beauty related was Makeup by Tiffany D. My cousin had asked if I'd ever watched her before. I was like, no, what are you talking about? Why are you watching YouTube videos on makeup? Don't you just know how to do it? And she's like, well, yeah, but I mean, she's like talks about products and whatever. And this was not that long ago, maybe like 2 years ago, year and a half ago. It wasn't that long ago at all. And so I was like, well, let me check her out. So she sent me a link, and I was addicted. I mean, I came home and watched like probably 20 videos. But it was Makeup by Tiffany D. I just loved her style. I loved the way she did makeup. I've always loved makeup. I've loved everything about makeup. Applying makeup, finding new makeup, collecting makeup. I mean, I've just loved it all. But she was the first person on YouTube that I ever watched. So, anyway, that's the first time tag. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you like tag videos, give it a thumbs up. And be on the lookout for an empties video coming soon and possibly an eye tutorial. And I will see you all soon. Bye!